Hello, everybody. All right, so it's another great day out here in the land, right? In the world. I'm having a contact issue. So if you see me and you see this tear come, I'm not sad. I'm super happy because I have a great guest that's going to be on today. So Meredith is going to be on. And I want to pronounce her last name correctly. So I'm not going to say it because I think it's okay. And I'm like, I want to say the right thing. So I didn't ask her, but we'll ask her when she jumps on. And so I want to always pronounce people's names right because, in the world of podcasting and just in general, people will pronounce somebody's name wrong. And I don't like to be that person. But guess who I am? So I'm Chisa Penix Brown. My company is Give It to the People, which is also the name of our podcast. And what we do is we are a mental wealth company that is focused on helping people get their mind right and their money right. So we have this podcast that we do, which really focuses on BIPOC businesses. And the reason that that's awesome is because She Podcast has a whole slew of BIPOC speakers that are going to be at the She Podcast Summit that is happening in June of 2023. And so myself and Meredith are two of the beautiful speakers that will be there that day. And we just wanted to introduce you to the speakers in advance so that this way you can get to know them. You can find out about their session. You can see what's interesting because sometimes you read things on a piece of paper and you see a session and then you have so many choices to kind of go through and you're like, I'm not sure which one I want to go through. But if you get to see the personality, then you can pick and you can make better decisions. So Meredith, did I say it correctly?
Merideth Hite Estevez.
Oh, it's Hite. So see,
Yes.
I was like, because I knew how to say Estevez, but I was like, is it Hite? Is it Hite? Because sometimes with things, okay, Hite. And you know what? I started to go that way, but I was like, no, that's probably not right. So
no worries.
Okay, great. So Meredith, give them a little background about you because you have a wonderful platform, a great podcast, and I just want the world to know who you are.
Great. Thanks for having me, Chisa. I really appreciate it. Did I say your name right?
You did.
Okay.
I'm
Okay, good.
all the technical difficulties today. Don't worry about me. I'm here.
Okay, sounds good. Well, my name is Meredith, and I am a professional oboist. And the oboe is a woodwind instrument that I started playing and followed my dreams into this career of being a professional musician, classical musician. And I looked around and I noticed how many of us were struggling, talking about mental health and creativity and how we lose sight of our joy for what we do, what we're making. And so I started, especially during the pandemic, I started learning more about that, especially how to serve the artists community and creators in general. And I was teaching at the time at a university, and I asked my university to pay for some podcasting equipment. And we had an audio engineer on our staff who helped me learn how to record and all that. So I started my podcast, Artists for Joy, 3 years ago this month actually. And it's called Artists for Joy podcast. And it is really a celebration or a 20, 30 minute time where you can connect as a creator to the joy that made you want to be an artist in the first place. So it helps you name what's important to you, name how you want to show up to your creative life, and then help you overcome some of the obstacles from that. So I'm currently living in Metro Detroit, Michigan. Okay. And that's a little bit about me.
And that's wonderful because I think that a lot of times, and I say this because I think that artists typically are very heart driven, right? And so they kind of focus on what makes them feel great. And I had a friend at one point in time who, she was running a business, but she always let the heart kind of guide her. And I'm like, that wasn't always the best business decision, right? But when you kind of talk about helping creatives thrive, right, in this particular area, I would just imagine, and I don't know, you tell me how tough it is today to be a classically trained musician, right? And to be able to make a living at what you really love, because I don't know if people, and I know there is a population, but I'm just saying as a culture, do we appreciate what you bring to the table the way that maybe if it was, 20, 30, even 100 years ago, do we appreciate the musicianship? And especially now that AI is out here just taking everybody's thing. So, I just feel like, how do you help creatives thrive the way that you're able to do that and be able to have a successful career doing what you love?
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing that up. I think that in a lot of ways, classical music has become irrelevant because we, as the purveyors of that art form, have not always done a great job in making it relevant to all types of audiences. And you mentioned BIPOC, like the composers that we have put forth in this Western classical tradition have been, old white males. And so there's a really great conversation now happening around promoting, women of color, people, indigenous voices, other folk songs that aren't European folk songs, just teaching kids how to play music using African folk melodies instead of German folk melodies and things like that. And so it's really exciting. It's a great time to be a classical musician, actually, because we're having an awakening and we're talking about these things that are really important to make it more relevant to our culture today and to all types of audiences, and making people feel welcome in this world. And as it pertains to my podcast, I think that this is really something that every artist has to do, is to look into their heart and connect with, how is this relevant to me? And what do I want people to know about my connection to my art form? And so when I'm playing music for an audience, for example, I want to connect not just to playing perfectly or presenting the score as this great composer put forth, but to invite the audience into a dialogue about why this music is great. And that's why the podcast is a great medium for that, because you get to talk to listeners and present these, conversations we're having with creatives of all types, and invite people to share their vision and see how they see themselves in it and how their own heart is affected by it.
Yeah. And I would just imagine, this is just for me, because my husband, I feel like now, once COVID happened and you were at home, you were able to look at things in such a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And so now when he watches movies, he is super critical of like the way that things are shot, the music that goes along with it, and, just all of that. And I would imagine for me, I love to hear a score that makes me feel intensified, right? Mm-hmm. Because the music, if you change up music, it's a totally different scene, right? So how do you find or tap into that to evoke that emotion in people? And I know that's not one of the questions that I had. It's just you went there. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go there because it's an interesting thing to me, because in my mind, I probably could do some things, but that's not my gift. And so, it's your gift. How do you evoke that emotion in what you're playing?
Really great question. I love talking about this. I actually went to school for 12 years for music. I have a doctorate degree in music from the Juilliard school. And so I went all the way to I want to learn everything there is to learn. I heard music that moved me, and I wanted to understand exactly how it worked. And so as an oboist, you may know, if you're not sure what the oboe sounds like, go and watch a movie, and at the most poignant point in the score, the moment where the heartbreak happens, or the heartwarming conversation between a mom and a child or whatever, there's usually an oboe solo there, because the oboe sound is poignant and a little sad. And so I think composers, that's one thing that composers do to evoke the emotion in people, is to feature a particular instrument, because they have different meanings. Like when you hear a trumpet, for example, trumpets are often associated with battle and royalty and things like that. And so there's already so much, just like certain words have certain connotations, certain instruments have that. And so composers use that. They also use tempo and the forces of the instruments. Like, is it all the strings or is it just one? And so tempo, timbre, some of those things are the ways we use to get people to feel things when we play music.
Yeah, no, I just always feel like, there's this, you are tied to something visually from what you heard, and so you hear those things, and to me, that emotion just always comes up, even if you don't mean for it to happen. Totally. But you can still hear it and feel it simultaneously. For me, so everybody's like that, but that's just, how I like to think about it. So if you're saying, listen, this world out here is so much going on, but you should still be an artist, and you should definitely live your dreams as an artist. And I truly believe that. What advice would you have for people that are in any form of the arts, where they're saying, look, they do want to make a living with this. Maybe they do want to start a podcast, or if they're just interested in making money with their talent, monetizing that for themselves. What advice would you have for artists?
Well, I think it's really important to learn the skill of protecting your creative process and your creative impulse,
Mm,
because we, as when we're kids, that impulse to create is, it just pours out, right? Like
mhm,
my daughter, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she loves to paint, and it doesn't matter whether it's perfect or not, because she's deeply connected and has this beautiful expression of creativity.
mhm,
And I think as we grow and we become more self aware and we experience wounding from either a teacher or a parent, or we happen to have a personality that's naturally very perfectionistic or critical, we sort of dumb down that creative process, that creative impulse, and we let it die, or we let it go dormant in us, and we believe that we're not talented, and we believe that we're not good enough, and and so we don't start a podcast, or we don't go out and try to get a degree in music, or try to busk on the on the sidewalk, because we're afraid. We're afraid of being disappointed. We're afraid of not being good enough. And so that's what I would say is learning. I'm also a trained coach, and that's one of my main parts of my business is coaching one-on-one creators who are burnt out and dealing with perfectionism and wondering where, considering a career change, and basically just stuck. And in coaching, we talk about the way you do that to really protect your creative impulse is to connect deeply to what matters most to you as a person. And so
mhm,
if you're connected with that intrinsic motivation of, this matters to me because I want my audience to know that this music is deeply beautiful and I want to express myself through music, I'm connected to my value about my self-expression, then it's easy to say, well, even though I got rejected from that audition, or even though I failed in the, quote unquote way of not achieving my goal right now, I can keep going because I know the thing I have in mind is like what matters most to me. And so
mhm.
connect with your values, and reach out and find a coach, somebody to talk to about protecting that creative impulse that everyone has, even if they call themselves like, oh, I'd never call myself an artist. I have so many people who listen to my show who was like, I don't call myself an artist, but I love your show. And it's like, we're all artists. We truly are. It's just a matter of the ways we express that.
Yeah, it definitely is. Now, you brought up something to me that I think is interesting. Like when I think about school, like people will say, "Oh, well, should you get this degree?" or "I want to be doctor such and such," or they want to continue to matriculate. A lot of times I think now it is because they want to be called something, or because they feel like a lot of times that new degree will get them more money. When
Mm-hmm.
it comes to artists, though, I would imagine that part of you becoming as great as you are is the comparison to something else, right? Because they
Mm-hmm.
want you to get this thing right.
Yeah,
And so that probably causes the perfectionism. Like in you trying to seek that degree and trying to be this great artist, right? It is compared to something else because they want you to play this a certain way. But there's
totally.
always so many different interpolations of things where it's like, but that could be magical if I just did something different, right? And so I like to always think about, when like jazz artists, most of the time they're not necessarily trying to play it the way that somebody else did, right? So if an artist is like going through school trying to learn that and perfect that craft, then how do they kind of find their own way through that so that they can have their version of creativity and it's not just rooted in perfectionism?
Yeah, that's it's so insightful and well put. It is true, and with classical music, it's particularly, I think, insidious because we have a score in front of us that we recreate, right? And so that sure, there's like expressive things you can do and decisions you can make creatively, but you are judged against whether or not you play the right rhythm at the right time. And so
Mm-hmm.
all I can answer is from me. I have found so much freedom in podcasting. Actually, it was like a huge vehicle for healing my perfectionism because I love podcasts. First of all, I was always a listener, and especially like Radio Lab and This American Life and that sort of like audio storytelling thing. And when I got to sit down with a mic and I knew nothing and I was learning, and it was like beginner's mind where you were naturally, when you let yourself be free and be more creative.
Yeah.
And like I was never going to copy Jad Abumrad because I'm not him, and like I can't tell his story. That's his story, And so I think the advice I would give to everyone is that one thing that can be fun and really joyful is finding a medium that is not at all connected to your main medium or the medium that's burning you out. So if you are a writer, if you're a novelist and you're feeling like you're feeling too perfectionistic around the novel, what would it be like if you started writing poetry and publishing that in like little snippets on Instagram Reels or whatever? Like, get yourself away. That's something adjacent to what you want to do, and that has a little bit more freedom and flexibility.
I like that. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I feel like my podcast does give me freedom. Now, on this particular one, I'm here to listen to somebody else's story and then give some feedback and kind of interject some of my stuff, right? And so it's still focused on business, but on that person's story. On my other one, on Real Ass Affirmations, I get to be an observer and just cuss and say what I want to say and whatever I'm feeling. And it's crazy because yesterday we're batching episodes. I'm recording yesterday, and I'm just like, when somebody upsets me, my episodes feel so much better because it's like you have that raw.
Yeah.
Like when some crazy stuff is going on in life, my episodes, I'm like, I'm ready to get on the mic right now, because then I feel like that feeling can come out and you can hear it and it's genuine and it's honest. And, and I don't worry about being perfect, so like with that one, we don't even edit it. It's just like, this is what it is. You're hearing it. And I'm not worried about perfectionism. And I do think, honestly, that there is a freedom in that, that you've been able to express, and you're not so just bound by the constraints of just regular grammar or spelling something right, or, how everybody else is going to feel about it. You just get to just, tell your story. What's been your favorite episode of your podcast so far? Or like the favorite thing you told people? And I didn't say that I was going to ask you that, but I just felt like this is where it was going.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm sure everybody who has a podcast who listens to this will agree. Like when you listen back to the first episodes, you're like cringing because you're like, oh my God, I didn't know what I was doing, But I love going, I have, over 100 episodes now. And I love going back and listening to the things I was crafting and all that I was learning. I mean, it becomes really like an audio diary or blog online. I think my favorite thing that I'm talking about recently, or probably my most downloaded episode, is about worthiness.
Oh.
And about how stepping into this sense of like capability and wholeness, and like as Brene Brown says, like belonging first to yourself, and not looking to the world for validation and affirmation. And like I coach a lot of people through contract negotiations, and when they need to name their salary number, and it can be a really difficult conversation for artists because we tend to equate our work with our worth. And that is a lie. We are not what we make. We are not what we do. We are capable and whole just as we are. And sometimes we do long to change and be different. And that doesn't mean that we're not loved and lovable. And so I love talking about that, because I think when people feel, when I feel really worthy, when I feel ready, I can take creative risks. I can be courageous. I can keep going in the face of disappointment and rejection. And that's where my real heart comes from, is believing that I'm worthy of success and of this creative life.
Yeah, I love that, because we are, and I just think if more people realize that, they would probably operate differently. So what brings joy to your day, though? Because, I would imagine creating is just a great thing, but it's different when that's your job, right? Like, so it's like if I do some marketing and some social media stuff, it's not the same as when it first started, right? And you could just do it for fun. Like now it's a job, so you look at things a lot more critically. But what is it about your day that's like, this is my joy, my happy space? What brings joy to your day?
I feel like as a parent, I should say my children.
You don't have to. We won't tell anybody.
But they do bring me a lot of joy. And I've learned so many lessons about creativity from my children, because as I said earlier, I've seen that play out in a really pure way. And I think, I'm working on my first book now. It's coming out next year.
Yes.
It's called The Artist's Joy, A Guide to Getting Unstuck, Embracing Imperfection, and Loving Your Creative Life.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so it's really, it was inspired by a lot of my podcasts, and it's connecting to how when we find joy, we make joy our motivation.
Mhm.
then we get unstuck and we can keep moving forward, regardless of whatever we face in the creative life. And so that's
Yes.
bringing me a lot of joy. I've dreamt of publishing a book for a really long time, and I felt really fearful and scared about that. And working in academia sort of perpetuated that desire to publish, but also like insecurity about publishing. And
Yeah.
so it's bringing me a lot of joy to look at cover designs for my publisher now and like see it coming to life. So that is bringing me, the book project is bringing me a lot of joy right now.
But you know what? I think that, well, and I don't know, you could tell me, if you hadn't started the podcast, would you have felt comfortable doing the book? Right?
No way.
One
Absolutely
had
not. Yeah.
before the other. And so now you have this great podcast. And I just want to congratulate you, because I know what it is to get over 100 episodes. And a lot of people will stop way before they do that. The podcast, like you said, is a chronicle pretty much, right? Like a journal of it. And then that can then lend to the book. So you needed the podcast to
Totally.
get to.
And I was like, if I had sat down, I actually heard, I don't know if you've ever heard of the podcast, The Next Right Thing.
But I'll check it
It's
out.
it's Emily P. Freeman. She's a great writer. She and I kind of both occupy this like spiritual creativity space. But the Next Right Thing podcast, she had written a couple books already, and she felt kind of creatively blocked. And so she tells the story about how she was like, somebody told her, why don't you make a podcast about what you're trying to write about and let the book kind of unroll as you learn more, because you're going to put out an episode and then you're going to hear back from people and learn about what resonates. And when I heard that she did that, and her podcast has millions of downloads now, I was like, maybe that is a good thing. I do love podcasting. This feels creative. There's not baggage around it. And so that's totally what I did too. And I pulled some of my podcasts out and we'll put them in slightly different forms in the book, but absolutely, podcast was like a journey of self-discovery and creative joy for me. Absolutely. I wouldn't be here writing this book without it.
I love that. And I mean, I just think that, one thing is it helps to allow you to have space to be creative in a different way. And then now you can take that and then you can make it something else. And I'm always telling people about repurposing things. It doesn't just have to be that you did it this one time.
Totally.
It can now become something different, and it can take a form, and it can also have a whole totally completely different audience. So if people said, Merideth, I like this, I want to come to your session, I'm thinking about it, I see you're going to be at She Podcast speaking, why should people come to your session?
Well, my session is called Podcasting as a Spiritual Practice.
Ooh.
So avoiding burnout, escaping perfectionism, and staying joyful on this audio content creation wheel, because it feels like a hamster wheel sometimes, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And so I want to help. I have a heart for creatives in general, and especially podcasters who are feeling like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I'm feeling really burnt out and it feels joyless and I need some help. And so it's an interactive workshop. And so we will get to the bottom of what's going on for you, help you name what matters, help you move forward, to say no to some things so that you can say yes to the right things, and figure out how to take care of yourself really well so that we can keep you creating great audio content for as long as you feel called to that work. So I think it's going to be really fun. It's kind of a group coaching scenario. So I think it'll be really fun. And even if you don't make it to my workshop, I hope you'll come say hi. I'll be there for the whole conference, and definitely shake my hand and tell me about your creative process, because I want to meet. That's one reason I'm so excited about going, is this is my first podcasting conference.
So you're also like doing research for the book too. Like, I'm just going to tell you, this is going to be my second She Podcast and second time speaking. I met so many great people that I still am in connection with today. I learned a whole lot. I saw that there were different ways to do things that I wouldn't have done it that way, but okay, I see why you're doing it this way. And I just had a more of a respect for the differences, because it was stuff that I would never think that people were podcasting about, and they were. And then people were at different levels too. So there's somebody that's super experienced that definitely needs to be coming to your session. And there's somebody that's brand new that needs to be coming to the session, because they still may be getting overwhelmed just about even really starting it. So I would say you're going to meet some amazing people. I'm excited to see you in person. And I'm really just, I'm excited because doing this this is making me so happy. Like I call it the little chocolates. So the little chocolates are like my warm and fuzzy, and they're inside, and they get so excited and so happy because now having this insight ahead of time, I think that it lends itself to even being a better conference because you get to know people in advance.
Totally.
And so,
Yeah. And I'm going to come give you a hug as soon as I see you.
exactly, right? Now my hair is gonna be colorful, so you will see me,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
It's like now I know Meredith. Oh, I love that. And so people can not just read the session, but they can come and they can really meet you and they can really get that experience. So I'm just excited to meet you. I know everybody else that's coming is as well. And would you like to leave people with like one final motivational word or tip or anything that you feel like you want to just throw into the world today?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've been writing recently about how to finish well, how to put something online and like get it out there and then deal with all your feelings about it. Right.
Ooh,
And I wrote 4 questions that are called the curtain call questions.
okay.
So sort of like at the end of a show when they're doing the curtain call, okay, you're going to write them down.
I'm writing them. I need that.
Okay. So they each 4 question has a theme. So the first question is about celebration. So what are you going to celebrate as you finish? What went well? Looking at things to celebrate in what you just made.
Okay.
The second question is about grief. What do you need to grieve? What do you wish had been different? And then the third question is notice. When did you sense something bigger than you? What things was there synchronicity involved, or like a spiritual out of body experience that you had? Like what did it feel like? What do you notice your feelings were during it? And then lastly is hope. What are you hoping for as you hit publish on the episode? What do you hope for anyone who may hear it? And so I think that these curtain call questions are really fun to take to your friends or family or spouse or your coach or your therapist and spend time really reflecting on, I publish my episodes on Friday, and the curtain call questions went out last week. So you can look at that episode of my show. But after I publish my episode, I take Friday morning off and I like go and sit in a coffee shop, or if the weather's nice, I'll sit outside and I'll just like journal about these questions. And I'll consider, what am I celebrating? What am I grieving? What am I noticing? And what am I hoping? And so that's what I hope people will do and you'll take away. And when we reflect more and process our feelings as we go, we can have more joy because then we're noticing the good and releasing the things that are hard. So that's where I want to go.
Listen, enough said, Meredith. I appreciate that. I have my stuff written down. I think those questions are great. So guys, just use them for your own, well-being and your own artistry. If you're watching on the replay, make sure you can still leave comments and you can check out everything about Meredith is going to be listed underneath the video. You can watch it immediately as it's done. And Meredith, I just want to thank you so much for being on today and tell everybody else, make sure that you always show up and show out and continue to give it to the people. Bye guys.
Thank you.